In this tutorial, I'm going to show you why shooting in RAW on your DSLR might have benefits that you don't know about. So here's the image that we took. Super underexposed, you can't even see what that is. I'm going to lighten that up in Photoshop. So I'm going to open up the JPEG. And I'm going to use the filter, camera raw filter. So this is the filter we're going to use on our RAW photo. I'm going to use it on the JPEG for now. So really quickly, I'm going to go over here to the settings on the side and brighten up this image as best as possible. Take the exposure up. Let's take some shadows, add a little bit of color. Maybe take the blacks up a tiny bit. There we go. So all that image detail was hidden in the JPEG. I'll hit OK, so we have our JPEG open. Now I'm going to go back and we shot the RAW format at the same exact moment, so all the settings from the camera will be the same. It'll be the exact same image except this is RAW. And I'm going to make the adjustments again. Let's get exposure, take the shadows up, bit of the blacks, add a little bit of saturation, and hit open image. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this RAW layer over onto the JPEG for comparison. Okay, so I've copied the RAW image on and everything looks really good. So what I want to do here is I'm going to zoom up on this man's face and I'm going to turn this top layer off, which is the RAW image, and watch the difference with the JPEG underneath. There's a big difference in the details. His face is actually made up of this solid kind of dark green color and his hair has no detail in it. If I put the RAW back on, you can see there's much more detail in his face and everything like that. So this is why RAW is better for shooting. If you shoot a photo and the exposure isn't right, you can actually repair it and there's much more image detail. So why is there a difference between RAW and the normal JPEG? Well, when the camera takes a photo and saves it as a JPEG, it does a lot of processing and compression to the photo. It changes contrast, saturation, sharpening, etc. And it doesn't leave you with many options afterwards. But RAW retains much more data from the camera sensor. More color, more highlights, and more shadows, which it gives you more to work with when you edit. You can fix color problems or fix a photo that was taken too light or too dark or both. And it basically means you have flexibility in how you develop your image, so you can be more creative. Why RAW is really helpful is, for example, in this photo here, this courtyard, we have these overexposed white areas and underexposed shadows. So the photo is neither overexposed or underexposed, it's all together. So I'm going to open this up in Photoshop. And when you open up a RAW image in Photoshop, it will automatically open up Camera Raw, which is Photoshop's Camera Raw processing filter. Over here on the right side, you can see we have a bunch of sliders. So I won't need to use the exposure because that will just brighten the whole photo entirely, which I don't want. What I want to do is, let's bring up the shadows first. So I'm going to take the shadow slider and slide this up, and you'll notice the difference if I move this left and right. We get a lot more hidden details in those shadows. If I adjust the blacks, I can bring up a little bit more detail in shadows, but not too much. Okay, so we've repaired the shadow detail there, and if I zoom into the back here, we can see all of the image detail in the background with all the tourists there. Now the next thing I want to work on is the overexposed white area. So let's take down the highlights. Let's take this down. And you can see when I do that, we get much more detail that was hidden here because it was overexposed. Now let's adjust the whites down. And again, we get even more detail there like that. And now to see the before and after of your changes that you've made, you can come down here and hit this button. And this will show you before. And then hit this little button here with a Y. And this will show you the split view. If you hold your space key, you can then click and drag. And you can also hit this button again to toggle if you'd like it with a line down the middle, or vertical, or a split through the middle. And to return it back to the changes that you've made, hit this button here, and we're back to our changes. So that way you can see your before and after at any time. We can also adjust saturation if we'd like. And you have texture, clarity, dehaze, and vibrance. I encourage you to experiment with these and see how this works with your particular image. If we'd also like to change the color temperature, you could change the temperature up here. And we can add some tint. So we can add some magenta or some green. but I'm going to keep that as it is. Now, there's an open image button here. We've finished all of our filter changes that we're doing in Camera Raw, but if you hit open image, all of these changes will be locked to this image and you won't be able to undo them very easily. We want to open this in a way that we can make these changes again and see all our settings. So hold the Shift key and you'll notice this open image button, when I hold Shift, turns to open object. Open image, hold Shift, open object. And what Photoshop has done is over here you'll notice that there's this small icon on the layer. This is open as a smart object. So what I can do at any time is I can go back in and adjust those settings. If I double click on the thumbnail here, Photoshop will open up the Camera Raw filter and you'll notice that all of our sliders here are where we left them when we made the changes. So you can adjust anything, you can change the highlights, you can change any of these sliders you like and hit OK. It will process the changes and your object will still be a smart object. So this is why RAW is really helpful. If you make changes to a JPEG, it's hard to undo those changes. So now let's open up that JPEG. This is going to be the exact same image, shot at the same moment with the same camera settings, but this is a JPEG, so it's not going to have as much image detail. So I'm just going to quickly use the filter, Camera Raw filter, and make the same changes and see what I can get out of this JPEG. So what I'm going to do now is, so we can compare this, I'm going to go to my raw image and I'm going to drag this layer over onto my JPEG and shrink it to fit so that we can compare them easily. So I have my raw layer on top and my JPEG layer on the bottom. So I'm going to turn my raw layer off and zoom in and let's check out these highlights here. So this ground where it's really overexposed, this is the JPEG, and I've done my best in the Camera Raw filter to try and bring those details out, but there simply isn't any details there. The details have been blown out and actually there's no details left. If I turn the raw layer on, a lot of details should come back in. Much more detail, that looks way better. So the benefit of the raw is the detail was there, even though it seemed super bright like this. You can actually take down the whites and the highlights and it reveals this hidden detail, but with the JPEG, there was no chance of getting that detail back. So if I turn off my raw layer here and we're just looking at my JPEG image here. If I go back to Filter, Camera Raw Filter, you'll notice that all of the changes that we made when we first edited the JPEG, these are all reset. And what this means is working with the JPEG like this is destructive, so it actually destroys the data on the JPEG and it's not easy to go backwards because it's permanent changes. So if I hit cancel, if I turn on my raw layer, because this is a smart object because we held shift when we opened the image, if I double click on this, it will open up the Camera Raw filter and you'll notice that all of our sliders are where we left them. So the benefits of RAW is that it keeps all of those changes in memory, so you can go back and undo them or slightly change them at any time. Nothing is ever locked and it's never actually kind of saved over in a way. So I could go in here and I could adjust my blacks, or let's see, let's make this a little bit warmer up here, add a bit of magenta and hit OK. It applies the changes, but nothing is ever permanent. I can double click on this and go back in and go, no, I need to make that a lot cooler. Let's go back down this way. And then I hit OK. So you never have any fear of doing any permanent damage to your image. You can always work with it again and again. You have to make sure that when you're opening the image to hold shift so that you open it as a smart object, as a new smart object layer. I have another sunset image here, which is underexposed a lot. You can see the sun there, but the beach and everything is underexposed. So let's open this up in Photoshop. And because it's a raw image, it will open up the Camera Raw filter. And now I'm going to adjust these sliders over here to bring out the best from this image. If I bring up exposure, it's a little bit too bright. Let's bring up the shadows. That's better. Let's bring up the blacks. That's a bit better. Exposure. So let's brighten this up with exposure. And then I'm going to undo the brightness in the middle here by taking down the highlights and taking down the whites. That's a bit better. Go a little bit of saturation. And I can experiment with contrast if I'd like. Let's undo the contrast a little bit. Well, 0 looks pretty good. And if I hold shift when I click the Open Objects button, it'll turn from Open Image to Open Object. That's what I want. And we have our smart object here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the JPEG and do similar sort of adjustments just quickly. Okay, so I've dragged over my raw image, which is a smart object layer, over the top of the JPEG, which I've tried to brighten as best as possible. And if I turn my raw layer off, there's the JPEG underneath and the raw back on. And now this is just crazy the difference you get here. If we come down to the bottom of the tree here and we see all the grass, you see how it's super pixelated and there's much less color detail. It's like the camera didn't have as many colors to be able to use to kind of save the image. If I turn the raw layer on, there's much more gradation in the shadows, in the colors, in the detail. Everything just seems a lot more detailed. And down here, let's look at the details of the waves and the sand here. I'll turn the raw off. Oh, that's terrible. So much less color detail, much better with the raw. And this photo was underexposed by a lot, but we were able to retain that information from the raw image. So I have this sunset image here. I'm going to open this in Photoshop, and what I'm going to show you is when you're making changes to this, how to watch out for exposing the brights and the highlights too much or crushing the blacks too much. So okay, we've got our image here and it's a little bit underexposed. So let's bring up the exposure. There we go. Let's bring up the shadows and let's bring up the blacks like that. Okay, so the thing we're going to do now is I'm going to expose a little bit too much. Up on the top right here, if I hit this, this shows the highlight clipping warning. So what this will do is if I take my whites up, you'll notice that I start to get red appear. And what this is doing is Photoshop is saying, you're making the whites so bright that there will be no detail here up in these red zones. It will just be pure white. And the same for this top left, which will be shadow clipping warning. So this is going to let you know if you've darkened anything too much. If I take my blacks down, you'll notice that we start to get blue patches appear in the image. And that's saying you're making these blacks so black that there's actually no detail left. And they call this crushing the blacks. And if I take my whites up and we get the red, and this is blowing out the highlights. So what you want to do is when you're making your changes, you can have these buttons toggled on or off. If you have them on, when you adjust your brightness, you can take it down so it just doesn't expose too much of the whites, and take your blacks down or up to adjust that. So if I slide my exposure up as well, you'll notice that that makes some of the whites overexposed. So I'll take that back down. And if I take my shadows down, that doesn't affect anything, so that's okay. It's mainly the blacks taking those down. So when you're adjusting your image, if you want to make sure that you're retaining your detail, you can toggle both of these buttons on and it will show you. And as a key indicator, you notice here that we have a red sort of shape up here in this button. That's showing that at some point in the image, there's a white that's blowing out, even though I can't see it. So I'm going to take this down a little bit, and you'll notice that as I adjust this slider, this red icon will turn on and off, make it so that it's off, and you should be okay. Okay, let's do some saturation. I might change the temperature a little bit, make this a little bit warmer, maybe with a little bit of magenta. And if I wanted to open this image, just normally I can hit that, but if I want to come back and make more changes and retain all the changes that I've done, remember, hold Shift and it will turn Open Image button into Open Object. Photoshop will process this image and it's open as a smart object, and I can double click at any point to open up the Camera Raw filter again. Another thing you can do with the Camera Raw filter is you can choose just a small area of your image to apply adjustments to. So let's say I wanted to brighten up this man here. This guy's face is in the sun, so he's nice and exposed, and this guy's in the shadow. So let's say I wanted to brighten up his face just a little bit. What you can do is you can actually create a mask, and all these sliders will only affect what's in this mask boundary. So let's use the brush tool up here, adjustment brush, and you'll notice you get a certain size of a brush here. You can change the size here to suit what you like. Let's take this down. I'm going to keep it about 5. You can also adjust the feather, so you can have this be smooth on the edges or faded on the edges. I'll take the feather down a little bit. Flow will be how strong it comes out. So first let's click on this next to color, this white square, and we're going to make this, let's make this green. What this is going to do is as I draw, you'll notice it's going to leave some green on the image, and this helps you keep track of where you've actually started to draw your mask. And I'm going to go about like that. There we go. And you'll notice you get this red circle. So what you've done is you've created a mask here. If you click and drag this, you can move this around. Undo, like that. So what we're going to do now is we're going to tell Photoshop that I want you to apply some changes I make here to this mask. So I'm going to get rid of this green though. I want to click on this and make it white. Okay, so now I'm going to make some exposure adjustments, maybe about there. Contrast a little bit. And what I can do is I can click on this mask, and if I hit delete, it removes what we've done. And then if I hit undo, it brings it back. So this shows you the kind of difference that you've made to the image just subtly and just on this man's face. When you want to adjust the rest of the image again, because we're currently only editing this mask, and you see that most of our sliders are in the middle, just the exposure and contrast is kind of changed. Go up here and you can hit your hand tool, and now you're back to editing your complete image. And you can see that our sliders are still in the states that they were when we made the changes. If you want to go back and select this mask that you've made on the man's face, you can click the brush tool, and any other mask that you've created will appear as these little white circles. So say if I made one over here on this man's face, and this woman's face, and this woman's face over here. So you can have multiple masks. If you'd like to delete a mask, click on the white circle to turn it red and just hit delete, and it will delete it. But say you want to edit that mask again, I'll hit the brush tool, and we're going to zoom in on our mask here. Let's say we have a little bit too much brightness. You see how we've adjusted and we brighten his face, but it's got this halo effect. That's because our mask, if I change the color of our mask so we can see it, let's go to pink, you can see that it actually extends out past his face. So we need to remove some of that. So if I hold Alt, then it turns my brush into an eraser. And I'm going to actually take down the feather on this and zoom in and see if I can get pretty precise with this. Remember to make sure to click on your mask here so that it's selected, and then hold Alt. And I'm going to come in here and erase. See if I can get really close to the edge of his head. So you can do this if you've created a mask and you need to make some changes afterwards. You're not actually ever stuck. I have to make sure to click on my mask, make sure it's selected, hold Alt. So you can see that I can get really precise with my edits here. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now I'm going to change my color back to white and zoom out, and there's less of a halo effect there. I might go in and remove even more of this halo effect, but you get the idea. So you can always go back and edit a mask at any time and make it perfect. So I'm going to return back with my hand tool, and now we're back at the beginning with all of our changes ready to go. So another way you can do a mask, I have this sunset image here, and you can go up and choose this Radial filter. If you click this button, you'll notice that all of our sliders return to the middle, except for exposure and contrast and highlights. Those are still up a little bit. And I'm just going to click and drag and make a sphere. If I click and drag that green button in the middle, this will move my mask around. So this is just like the mask that we drew by hand, except this is a ellipse here. You can change the ellipse at any point by grabbing these on the outside. And you'll notice it's already applying this effect in the middle, and you can see that we're getting some blown out highlights. We've gotten that red effect there. What you can do is you can come down here and choose outside. And this will make the changes happen outside or inside the filter. Okay, so about there. And now I'm going to take the exposure down and the contrast down. Okay, so let's take down the shadows. And let's take the exposure down a little bit, like that. Highlights down. So what we're doing is we're just affecting the outside here, like that. And if I click on the mask and then hit delete, you can see the changes that are being made. I can undo. So it's applied and created a little bit of this vignette in our image. At any point, I can click and move this around, and you can see the effect that it's applying here. So say you wanted to just brighten up the sand a little bit. Let's bring this down. You can also rotate by putting your mouse on the outside, and your mouse will turn into these curved icon. So let's say about there, move it around. So if I hit delete, you can watch the difference. And then undo. But say I don't want to use the radial. Let's click on it, and I'm going to hit delete, and it will get deleted. Let's use the graduated filter. Click and drag down. And at any point you can move these left or right, and you can extend them up or down. And now let's put this up here. Let's experiment. I'm going to click and drag in the middle, and I'm just going to have this affect the sky about there like that. Okay, and now if I click on my white here and make it pink, you can see the actual effect it's doing up on the top there, like that. Okay, so let's adjust the temperature. Let's make this a blue sky. Oh, that looks great. And you can see if I click down here, if I move this down, we can adjust where the blue starts to appear. If I wanted to make this a starker, sudden difference, about there, there's some blue on the top there. And at any point you can click on your mask here and hit delete, and it will remove it. If I hit undo, you can see what a difference that makes. If you want to adjust the regular photo, the whole photo, remember, go up and hit your hand tool up here, and you're back to adjusting all of the sliders here. If you want to go back and adjust your gradient that you've just applied, click on the gradient, and you'll notice that you have your original gradient here, like that. So you can apply multiple hand-drawn masks, gradients, radial filters, and have multiple sections of your image edited and changed with a lot of precision. So to recap, the pros and cons of shooting in RAW are: the cons are if you set your camera to shoot in RAW, if you're shooting a lot of images in quick succession, say like 10 frames a second, it can slow down the camera a little, so experiment with that. Compared to JPEGs, RAW photos take up more space. And that means more space on your memory card in your camera, and also more space on your computer when you're storing them. And the other thing is with RAW, you need a special program to open it and edit those RAW images, so something like Photoshop, which you may not have access to. But the benefits in RAW far outweigh these cons. You get more details in the colors. You can adjust your color temperature easily. You get a higher dynamic range, and basically that means between the white, the brightest part of your image, and the darkest part, there are more stages and steps, which means that the image can retain multiple shades of a single color. And that just basically means more color and more detail. If you make changes to your RAW image, it's non-destructive. With a JPEG, if you make changes, the computer gets rid of those other details, and you actually cannot get those back very easily. With a RAW, you can always go backwards and forwards, not lose any of that image data. It's all there for you to be creative and play with. And also, if you're doing professional shoots for clients, this is really good because it means when you do your shoot, you can have much more freedom and creativity with those final photos before you send them off to your clients. Or if you're actually sending the image to a client directly, you were just the photographer, this is much better, and a lot of clients will prefer RAW images over a JPEG. So if you can set your DSLR to shoot in RAW, or also shoot in RAW and JPEG at the same time, so it saves 2 files at the same time every time you take a photo, try that. Open it up in Photoshop, test out the sliders, see the kind of results you get, and my bet is that you will probably never shoot in JPEG again, and you will always shoot in RAW.